Imagine waking up to a world in chaos. The thunder of war shakes every corner of the earth, and millions of lives are on the line. A conflict so vast that it reshaped the world in ways we still feel today. But how did it all begin? What sparked the most devastating war in human history? Today, we're going to break down the story of World War II, one of the darkest yet most pivotal chapters in our collective history, starting from the very first spark. But be warned, this is not just a history lesson. It's the story of survival, courage, and the price of peace. Stick with me until the end, because you won't believe the twist of fate that nearly changed everything. World War II didn't start overnight, nor was it the product of a single bad decision. No, this war was decades in the making, the result of a fragile peace that never truly healed the wounds of the First World War. You see, the Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was meant to end the fighting, but instead, it sowed the seeds for the next conflict. Economic depression, territorial resentment, and a thirst for revenge took root, particularly in Germany. Enter Adolf Hitler, a man whose charisma and ambition would soon send the world into a spiral of madness. By the time he took power in 1933, Europe was a powder keg, and Hitler was ready to strike the match. But it wasn't just his quest for power. It was a dangerous ideology, an idea of racial superiority and territorial expansion. This man's dream of a Third Reich had consequences no one could yet comprehend. In 1939, Hitler made his boldest move yet, invading Poland. It was this invasion that dragged the world into the conflict. Britain and France declared war on Germany, but they were too late to stop the storm. The dominoes were already falling. As war spread across Europe, a new world order was taking shape, one of allies and enemies, promises of peace, and the horrors of combat. Now, this is where the stakes skyrocket. Germany wasn't fighting alone. It had powerful allies, Italy and Japan, forming the Axis powers. Together, they sought to reshape the world. Meanwhile, the Allies, led by Britain, France, and soon after, the United States and the Soviet Union, began to mobilize for war. As Germany advanced, Britain stood defiant. They fought back fiercely, especially during the Battle of Britain, where the skies were filled with chaos. And let's talk about Dunkirk for a second. Picture this. More than 300,000 British soldiers stranded on the beach, facing annihilation. How do you think they escaped? It wasn't with military might alone. It was with the collective will of civilians in boats, braving enemy fire to rescue their men. A miracle of humanity in the midst of destruction. Meanwhile, across the world, the United States had been watching, hesitant to enter. But the Japanese had a different plan. On December 7th, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. The result? The United States, awakened from its isolation, declared war on Japan the very next day. The war had now truly become global. Back in Europe, it wasn't just about fighting on the ground. The beaches of Normandy, D-Day, June 6th, 1944, an invasion like no other. The Allies launched Operation Overlord to reclaim Europe. And though it seemed impossible, the tide began to turn. But not without immense cost. Lives were lost, families destroyed, but progress was being made. However, every turning point came with a price. The Battle of Stalingrad, the defeat of Hitler's forces on the Eastern Front. The Allies were pushing forward, but it wasn't without sacrifice. Every victory meant more lives lost, more destruction, and the feeling that the world was teetering on the edge of annihilation. Then, in 1945, came the final act. A decision so powerful, it changed the future of warfare forever: the atomic bomb. The United States dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ending the war with Japan, but leaving the world in shock and awe. The horror of that moment remains imprinted in history. Was it worth it? Was the price of peace too high? These questions linger even today. In Europe, Hitler's dream crumbled. The Allies stormed Berlin, and by May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered. The war in Europe was over, but the world was forever changed. Millions had died, nations had been reshaped, and the global balance of power would never be the same. But there's one last twist, one final piece to this colossal puzzle that many never saw coming. The aftermath of World War II wasn't just about rebuilding. It was about who would lead the world moving forward. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, leading to a new kind of war, the Cold War. The seeds of a global divide were sown. So, what happened next? How did a world shattered by war rebuild? And what was the cost of that peace? The story of World War II doesn't end with the signing of surrender papers. In fact, it's just the beginning of a new chapter that would define the next 50 years of global history. Stay tuned, because in the next episode, we'll dive into the Cold War, the most tense and pivotal standoff in modern history. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. If you found this journey through time insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on our next adventure through history. The past shapes the future. Let's keep drifting through time together.